They were cast aside, dusty, dated, and pretty questionable. But today I've put together a compilation of 15 farmhouse makeovers, and I have turned them into beautiful home decor. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you're new. My name's Melissa. I can't wait to see which one of these 15 is your favorite, so let's get started. For this project, I'm making over this box that I got from Goodwill for $2, and I definitely need to clean it up because it's really dirty. And I'm gonna sand, especially on this side, to make sure. I'm gonna try to sand this off. So let me go ahead and get this cleaned up and get this sanded. I started sanding it and I kept sanding and sanding, and it was just taking it down to the raw wood, and I really didn't want to do that. So I just decided to clean it up real good with an all-purpose cleaner, and then I sprayed it with some Zinsser shellac, and that way I would get a pretty even coat of this Dixie Belle paint. This is the first time I had ever used the Dixie Belle paint. I had just bought it this day, so this was my first project to use it on. So I was not sure how I was gonna like it. I had seen a lot of people using it, and I thought surely it's not gonna be that good. But I have to say, I have been really impressed with it so far. I really like it. In fact, I got so excited about using it that I forgot to put these little feet on before I started painting it. So I stopped painting and got these little wooden feet put on. And once the wood glue hardened, then I continued painting. And I did give this 2 really good coats, and the 2 coats covered this really well. So all it took was the 2 coats of this Dixie Belle paint in the color Drop Cloth. All right, the paint is dry on this, and 2 coats covered it really well. So now I want to put a transfer on it, and for this, I'm going to use this transfer right here, and this comes from the Redesign with Prima pack called Morning Farmhouse. And the store where I have my vendor booth, we do carry Redesign with Prima, but this is one that I got a while back, and I got it from Amazon. So I will put the link to this one in the description box, but I will also put a link to our Facebook store, our Facebook page, the store Facebook page, in the description box. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get this cut out, and I'm gonna transfer it on to the box. If you've never used a transfer, they're very easy to use. You just take the backing off, set the transfer into place where you want it on your project, and then use the stick that comes with the transfer pack and start rubbing that transfer onto your project while you lift that plastic sheet up and away. And once you've transferred it all off of the transfer image, then you just rub back over the image with that clear plastic sheet. Now you do want to make sure that you seal in that transfer, so I'm going to use a clear wax. I'm going to first go over the box with the clear wax, and once I go over it with the clear wax, I slightly wipe away some of the excess, but then I go over the edges with this little dauber and some antique wax. I don't wipe any away at first. I want to make sure that I get all of the clear wax on, wipe away most of the clear wax, go over all the edges with the antique wax. And here it is finished. I think this looks just so pretty, and I love the addition of the feet. I think not, I mean, it literally elevates it, but I just think it just takes it up a notch. But you'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. I just think it's so pretty. And I have plants in this, but this could just be used for so many things. This could be used in a bathroom, in a baby room, in a coffee bar, just so many possibilities. Now for this, I'm definitely going to use my electric sander just to try to get this off as quickly as possible. I may have to go in some of the edges with them like manually, but I'm going to go ahead and try to get this blue sanded off the edges. Okay, I got off as much as I could, but I couldn't get it all off. So I'm just gonna have to go to plan B, and I'm gonna paint it. And yeah, so we're gonna go to plan B. For the paint, I'm gonna use this Country Chic paint, and this is in the color Driftwood. I'm almost at the end of my paint, so I did have to add a little bit of water to it, but it does give really good coverage, and I only had to do 1.5 coats. Now that the paint has had time to dry real good, I'm gonna go ahead and put down a transfer, and this transfer is a Redesign with Prima transfer, and it comes from the Morning Farmhouse set, and I will leave the link in the description box. Again, these transfers are really simple to use, especially these bigger ones. These bigger ones are really, because there are no like fine details to them, they just are much easier to go down. If you do find that you have pulled up too quickly and some of the transfer is still on that plastic piece, all you do is you just lay it back down on your project, and you go back over it with that stick and you rub it some more until the transfer lays down onto the piece, and then you start lifting the plastic back up again. Once you have transferred all of the image onto your project, then you take that plastic piece, the vellum, and you just go over the image with that vellum, and that just ensures that that image is securely down onto the project. Now this is where I'm hoping it's gonna look like the stained wood. I'm gonna use this antique wax, but I put it in this little bowl and I'm diluted it with some water. I thinned it out really good, and I'm gonna go over the top of this, and then I'm gonna wipe it back with a shop towel, and hopefully this will give me that stained wood look. So basically all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go over the top with the diluted antique wax, and I'm gonna try to go across it with, you know, one full stroke across the top, and then I'm gonna take my shop towel and I'm gonna go across the whole thing in one stroke. And that is gonna and I'm not gonna wipe it away completely, because what this is gonna do is it's gonna kind of hopefully give me that sort of stained wood look. I did this one other time with something, and it was kind of a happy accident, so I'm hoping I can replicate the look. And just to make sure that I get the color I want, I do end up going over this a second time with just a very light coat of this again, and just barely wiping back, but I do want to make sure I get that just the right color that I want. And with that, this project is finished. I think this turned out really great, and this is how I wanted it to turn out. So I'm really pleased. Let me know what you think in the comments. I have this really pretty frame that I actually thrifted from my neighborhood. I've mentioned it before in videos, but we have neighbors that just put stuff on their porch and say, hey, it's free, come take it. So I decided I would. So I am using the color Truffle in Waverly paint, chalk paint, and I'm gonna paint this. And what I was really wanting to do was to use the brown as sort of my base. I should have spray painted it brown, because once I painted it the green color and I started kind of wet distressing it back, it went back to the gold. So I had to cover, this is the color green that I used. So once I started wet distressing it and seeing that gold, I just went back over those spots with the green. But this is a really good green color to use. And if you want something a little bit lighter, you can always add some white paint to it. If you want something a little darker, you can add some of the truffle to it to make it a little darker, but it looks lighter going on, and once it dries a little darker, but it's such a pretty color. And what I have planned for this, the green, is going to be perfect. I found this image on a Google search. I just Google searched vintage flowers, and I'm going to cut it out, and I have this piece of cardboard that's going to go in the frame. So I'm going to Mod Podge this image to the piece of cardboard. And once I will see if I can find the link to this image, and if I do, I'll put it in the description box. But I used this image when I was redoing my son's room, and here is where I'm wet distressing, and you can see that gold starting to come through. So I went back over it with that green paint. Now, this time, I'm definitely using that clear wax to give it a base coat. I am going to put a dark wax over it, but I wanted to make sure that I would be able to wipe away excess. So here I am just wiping back the excess of the clear wax, and I'm using the antique wax in Waverly to go over, especially mainly the top part that has all the pretty details. And once I start wiping that back, you can really see those details. And I started to say earlier, I used this image when I redid my son's guest room, and I loved it so much. I knew that it would be perfect with this frame and this finish. So I'm really happy with the way it came out. The frame to me is exactly the way I wanted. So now I'm just going to put the glass back in, and I let the image dry completely on, let the Mod Podge dry completely on that piece of cardboard, put it back in the frame, and this project is done. This is such a super, super easy project. If you're wanting to change out home decor, this is such a simple solution. Paint those frames, find an image you like, and look how beautiful this turned out. And this was going in my booth, and it actually sold as well. It sold pretty quickly, probably quicker than the little tray that you saw in Project 1. But this is so, so pretty. See, because I don't want any paint to come through, because I am going to paint it a light color. So I'm going to try to sand off the C. Okay, and clearly I can't sand and film at the same time. But anyway, now that I have that sanded off, I'm going to put some molds onto the board, and I'm going to use this Redesign with Prima mold, and I want to put one at the bottom and at the top. So I'm just going to put this baking soda into the mold to keep it from sticking. And I'm going to use this air dry clay, and I roll it into my hand to kind of warm it up. I put it into the mold, and then I use my thumb to press it in and then press it outward to get it to where, you know, I get all the excess out. And then I just roll the mold out, and now I'm using some wood glue on the bottom, and then I attach it to the board. And I did the same thing for the top. Now I'm using the Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm going to be extra careful around the mold because even though it is dry on there, it's still trying to set, so I don't want to mess up any of those details. But I am probably only going to have to do one coat since it is such a similar color to the existing color. So I'm just going to do one coat of the paint and then let that dry. Now that my paint is dry, I'm going to use a transfer. So I'm going to use this set that I got. It's a redesign with Prima set, and it is called Morning Farmhouse, and I got it off of Amazon. So I'll make sure that I put a link to it in the description box. Before I take the backing off, I want to make sure I have them placed kind of where I want them. Then I'm going to start with the little chicken, and I get him placed, but these transfers are really easy to use. You just take the backing off, place them where you want them, and you use the little stick that comes with each transfer set, and you use it to rub that transfer onto your project, and you just lift that little plastic piece off. After the transfer is set, you use the plastic piece to rub it onto your project just to make sure that your transfer is set into place really well. Now I want to put some black stripes up at the top. So I've already put some painter's tape up at the top. I'm going to use this Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, and I'm going to use this little dauber to daub the paint on. I don't want to brush it on because I want it to kind of have almost when I put it on, I want it to almost already have an aged look to it. So that's why I'm daubing it on with the sponge. And then after I finish getting the paint on, I will take the painter's tape off. Then I will put the tape on the side and do the paint on the side as well. Off camera, I used washi tape to space out for smaller lines for more black paint. And I just use my finger to apply that paint rather than use a brush. And then to finish this off with a little detail, I'm using some of that black paint on a dry brush just to get around the edges and also around the detail of the molds that I created. And that finishes this project off, except for the ceiling of the project. I don't want any of this black paint to smear, so I'm not gonna paint a sealer on. So I'm just gonna use this acrylic sealer in the matte finish, and this project will be finished. And this is how it turned out, and I think it turned out really pretty. I think the details of the black just look really pretty on the sides. I think the farmhouse chicken looks really pretty. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. This is a little chair that I got at an estate sale, and it is not very big. But anyway, I got it for like $5. Probably paid too much for it, but I don't know, I liked it. But it's been sitting in my booth for a while, and so I just need to get it sold. So I think I'm gonna make it over kind of with a man in mind, like a, man cave or men's office or something like that. But I'm gonna use this IOD packet, and it's a Christmas packet, but in it, let me show you, there is an image that's this deer right here. And I just think that'll go good, and I'm gonna use this country chic paint in the color Secret Garden. I like the green of it, so I think that'll go well together. And I could make this perfect by filling in those little gaps there, but I want it to stay rustic. And like this part right here has some wood that's not, perfect, but I kind of want to keep it that way just to keep that rustic feel. So I'm just going to give this a paint job and then distress it, and then we'll move on to the image. Every time I use this color, I think I fall more in love with the color. I just think it's such a pretty, pretty green. And then when you use an antique wax with it, it's just so pretty. But the paint, the country chic paint, I actually really like this paint. I've used it a few times, but the more I use it, the more I like it. It's self-leveling, so you really don't see brush marks in the paint, and it just goes on real smooth. But I only gave this one coat of paint because I didn't want it to be too hard to sand through, and I did want it to look as rustic as possible. So, one coat was enough coverage for for the look that I was kind of going for. Let me know in the comments what your favorite brand of paint is to use. I'm really not sure what level of sandpaper this is. It's probably a 180, I'm not sure, but I wanted to make sure I got through that paint and showed a lot of that wood. So I distressed it pretty good, and just, around the edges where you would normally get wear. Now I'm gonna put the transfer down, and I just take the little stick and I just rub it on top of the plastic vellum piece and just transfer that image onto the project. And when you finish transferring it, you just rub over it with the plastic vellum, and that just sets the image in place. And this image is set and ready to go. Now that I have the transfers on here, I'm just gonna give it a coat of clear wax, and that's to seal the paint in. And then I'm going to go over, you always have to seal in the transfer. And once I got the transfer on the back, it was a little whiter than it looked in the packet. So I'm just going around the image with some antique wax just to kind of brown it up a little bit. And this is what it turned out like. And you know what? I listed this the day I finished it, and it sold in one day. So that was amazing because it had been for sale in my booth, just brown plain wood, for so long. So I was super excited. For this last project, I'm taking this cutting board that I found at a thrift store, and I'm going to paint it that green. And this is the celery color green that I really like, but I'm pretty much out. So I'm taking the green moss and I'm going to mix it with the ivory Waverly chalk paint, and I'm just gonna get it mixed up to where it's about the same color as the celery, and you can see that the color in the bottle is pretty close to the color in the bowl. So now I'm just gonna give this, I thought I was gonna do 2 coats, but it really kind of did okay with 1 coat. And so after I did the 1 coat, because I knew I wanted to distress it, so I didn't want the paint to be so thick that it would be kind of hard to distress. So once everything is painted, I'm going to use this transfer, sorry, not this transfer, this stencil, and I'm just going to lightly dab this black chalk paint into the grooves of the stencil. And once I finish, I take the stencil off and let it dry completely. And this is what it looked like after I took the stencil off. So now I'm just gonna take some sandpaper and I'm gonna just start sanding away until I get it, you know, distressed and sanded to kind of what I had in mind. And you know, not everyone is into distress, so if you don't like it distressed, then by all means you can skip this step. Once I got it to where I wanted it, I'm going to go over it with a clear coat of, or a coat of the Waverly Clear Wax. Next, I'm going over it with some antiquing wax, and I like using the clear wax first, again, because it kind of gives you more, you know, freedom with the antiquing wax, because if you kind of get too much in one area, you can wipe it down. And I actually think once I got all this done, I decided I'm gonna add some fabric to this little hole right there, just to kind of complete the look. Unfortunately,
fabric
I
and ribbon
don't have it done right now, so this is just kind of
and then tied them
what it looks like
into
now.
the hole. And this is what it looks like with that ribbon.
I'm gonna make a sign with like a rooster, and I found this rooster on just Google image search. I've searched vintage roosters, and I found this, and I took the time to cut him out. I'm gonna do a reverse kind of transfer. The brown color that I'm gonna use is this Waverly, and it is in the color Truffle. Sorry, in the color Truffle. I'm gonna go ahead and give this coat, or give this a coat of the Truffle chalk paint. Now that this coat of paint has dried, I'm gonna go over it with this Waverly Ivory. I put the chalk paint in this little bowl, and I did add a little water to it because it was kind of thick. It's getting to the end of the bottle, so it's kind of thick. So I added a little bit of water to help it paint a little easier. After the first coat, it definitely needs a second coat. I'm not going to worry about a second coat on the sides, but the top definitely needs a second coat. And it needs a second coat probably because I added the water. So if I hadn't added the water, it would have been very thick, but I'd rather do 2 thin coats rather than 1 super thick coat. Now that it's completely dried, I'm gonna use a 180 grit sandpaper and just start distressing it. And if you don't like distress, you don't have to do it, but I want this to look very, well, as vintage as possible. So I'm gonna go ahead and start distressing. All right, for this next part, what you're gonna do is you're going to take your image and put Mod Podge on the actual front of it, okay? Once you get the Mod Podge on there, then you're gonna place it upside down, okay? And you let it dry completely. Now, the part that is gonna be a little tricky for me is all of these boards are different levels. So I'm gonna figure out where I want him to be. So probably somewhere like that. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to like cut or bend this right here, and that's gonna be where I cut it. I'm gonna have to cut it, I think. That's gonna be the best bet. And then I'm gonna cut, and then I'm gonna do the same thing here and the same thing here. And since this top part is, there's gonna be the split of where I cut it right here, I'm gonna go ahead and put the middle part on first. So I'm gonna just cut on the bend. Probably should use my glasses for this. All right. So what I'll do is once I get this middle part put on right here, then I'll add that. And this is the part where you add the Mod Podge. You just you don't want to put it too thick, but you also want to put enough on there where it's gonna allow it to stick real good. But once you put the image on the surface, you want to make sure that you press it down as much as possible. You might even want to take a paper towel and just press into it. All right, I have it all glued on, and I just will say from experience, let this dry overnight. It is best to let it dry longer than shorter. So you want to make sure you let it dry overnight. One time I did this and I got impatient and it didn't come out. So you want to make sure you let it dry I would say at least 12 hours, but I probably won't do the next step until tomorrow afternoon. So be patient. All right, here we are. It's the next day, and I have a wet paper towel. You can use a cloth, whatever. And I'm just going to put it on the paper like this. So I just kind of want to get it real good and wet. You don't want it sopping wet, but you want it good and wet, because then what you're gonna do is you are going to start just kind of doing this, pulling the paper away, like rubbing your finger on the paper. And what that does is it starts revealing, I probably need to get this a little more wet. It starts revealing the color. See that? You just start pulling it away. don't want to rub too hard because then it starts taking away too much, but you can see how that does. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish working on this, and then I'll show you what to do next. I have to say there's something oddly satisfying about doing this and peeling that paper back. I don't know if it's because it kind of reveals the transformation, but it's oddly satisfying. All right, so what I usually do is, this is still kind of wet from me wiping stuff away, but sometimes if you don't get enough of the paper off, it starts to turn cloudy. So I kind of learned that if I put a little bit of Mod Podge on the top of the image before it, you know, dries completely, you won't get that cloudy look. So that's what I'm gonna do now. I'm just gonna take some Mod Podge and just put some Mod Podge on just the image. And I'm only Mod Podging the image right now because I still have to go back and do some stencil work. And then once that's done, then I'll Mod Podge everything.
And I totally did not mean Mod Podge everything. Once everything dries, the stencil, paint, the Mod Podge on the rooster, then I'm gonna go back with a wax and seal it all in with a wax, not Mod Podge.
All right, for the stenciling, I don't have the stencil for what I want to put. So I just, on my Cricut, I did like a reverse whatever, where I just took out the actual writing. This is not permanent vinyl, so I should be able to pull it up. I am also using this Waverly chalk paint in ink. Now that everything is completely dry, I'm gonna go over it with some Waverly clear wax and then wipe back the excess with a towel. All right, the wax coating is finished drying. So I have my hot glue gun and I have some little sprigs of greenery. I think this is maybe boxwood. So I'm just going to hot glue them down. And I wasn't thinking about hot glue and stuff. It's not gonna stick to this wax. So I'm just taking some sandpaper and lightly sanding away a little space of where I want the hot glue to be. The first thing that I'm gonna glue down is the 2 little boxwood sprigs. I started to use 3, but I think 2 was enough. And once that glob of hot glue dries, then I'm gonna start putting the ribbon on. And I have this extra little piece of the ribbon. I had to use scraps, and so I'm using it as extra kind of tail to the bow. And then I made a small little bow with the other part of the ribbon. And then after I do that, I'm gonna put the button down. And this is what it turned out like. And I have to say,
I am so pleased with the way it looks. I just think it is so adorable. So the next time you're in the thrift store and you see some of these little wood pieces, don't pass up on them. For this project, I am going to do something special with this frame that I thrifted from my neighborhood. And the thing about this frame is at first I thought there was a part missing down here at the bottom, but I don't think there is. I think it was just made that way. So the only problem with this frame is that when you stand it up, if you're not careful, the glass will fall out. So I'm not going to use this as a traditional picture frame. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take this out, take the glass out. I'm not gonna be using the glass. And I'm gonna paint this with Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. And then I'm gonna antique it. But let me go ahead and get this painted. Like I said, I'm using Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. I just really like this color because it's not super yellowy, but it's not stark white. But I paint the front and the back of this, and it's gonna take 2 coats because I wanna make sure that I get really good coverage over the gold. And when I go in for the second coat, I use a stippling motion, like I just dab the paintbrush on the frame just to give it a little bit of texture and not show brush strokes. I've got the frame painted and I painted both sides. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna paint, this is the backing of the photo frame, the picture frame. I'm gonna paint this side with the same color. And I have this knob, it's a wooden knob, and I'm gonna use it. So I'm gonna paint this that same plaster color. And I did end up giving this 2 coats, as well as the wooden knob. I gave it 2 coats as well. And on the second coat, I did that dabbing motion. Now, once that's painted, I go over the frame and the knob with the clear Waverly wax. And once I go over it real good, I want to get in all those little crevices and all the little details. But after I do that, I go over it with a shop towel and get off all the excess. Then I take a small little paintbrush and I go in all the little detail parts with Waverly antique wax. I don't want to go over it with the big brush because I want to try to keep as much of the white color as possible, and I just want it to look just a little bit grungy and a little bit vintagey looking. So I try to keep that antique wax as, you know, limited as possible. Then I'm going to take some E6000 and some hot glue. I'm running it along the inside rim of the frame, and then I'm going to slide that back portion in there and let that dry completely. Once that's dry, I'm going to take the screw to the knob and I'm going to put it in the hole at the top. And I'm going to take this basket. It's a half hanging basket that I thrifted from a thrift store for like $2. I'm going to screw that on and attach it to the frame, and that's what's going to hold, the knob is what's going to hold the basket in place. And I'm going to fill the basket with some greenery, and this becomes a sort of, you know, planter or whatever you want to call it that is framed. I just think this is so cute and I love the way it looks, and I was thinking about putting it in my booth for sale, but I'm keeping it for myself because I really like the way this turned out. And once I set it up to stage it in my house, I was like, okay, I'm keeping this for myself. So I hope this just gives you a little bit of inspiration on a different way to put greenery in your decor. And while at St. Vincent de Paul one day, I came across these, and these were $2.25 each, and they were ceramic. They didn't have any chips on them, so I thought these would make a great makeover. So these definitely went in my shopping basket. All right, for these, I was really torn about how I wanted to refinish these. These are very shiny, and I don't really know what kind of finish this is as far as like what look they were going for. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go for a wood look like I did with the duck, or if I wanted to go with white. But then I decided if someone wants to hang it on their walls, if their walls are white, it might not show. So I decided to go with Old Faithful moss. I'm gonna go ahead and get these painted and get all of this covered up, and then we'll go from there. Now I gave these 2 coats of the paint, and in hindsight, I really should have either sprayed this with shellac or given it a base of like a brown spray paint or a white spray paint. So next time I find something like this, I will definitely give it a coat of some kind of base coat of spray paint. Now that the 2 coats of paint have dried on both sides, I'm gonna go over this with the Waverly varnish in matte. And this is where I realized I should have given it a base coat of spray paint, because even as lightly as I was going over it with the varnish, some of the paint did come off. So once the varnish was dry, I did go back over those few little spots with some paint, let it dry, and I went back over it with more varnish. And once that was dry, I am going to go over it with some antique wax and wipe all of that back. And I find that some of it was pooling in some of those areas, so I just took that brush and went back over it again, wiped it back again, and that was it for this project. I really like the finish of these. I did both sides, the front and the back, and I really do like the finish. It's almost like a glaze look, so I think it turned out good. But this is what it looks like, and you can see that it does almost kind of look like a glaze in there, and I really think it's very pretty. These can be hung on the wall, or they can just, you know, lay flat in someone's decor, but I think they're very pretty. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments. I have this little stool that I am going to paint, and I'm going to decoupage some paper on it. I used to have one of these in my booth that I did something similar to this with, and it sold. So I want to put something back in there in my booth, so hopefully it'll sell again. This time it's going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to go ahead and get a coat of paint on this, and it's going to be a coat that is going to be kind of a messy coat. I'm not worried about getting full coverage, but I'm going to use the Waverly chalk paint in plaster. Use this redesign with Prima mold, and I'm gonna use my air dry clay. I use this Sculpey air dry clay, and I'm gonna make some trim to go around the edge of the stool, just to kind of dress it up a little bit and dress it up as much as this shabby chic looking stool can be.
But anyway, basically all you want to do is, I have a little bag that I keep with some cornstarch and a little brush, and I'm just going to put the cornstarch in the mold, and this is going to keep the air dry clay from sticking. And then you just take some of the clay, you want to kind of get it a little bit warm, and then you're going to kind of start rolling it into a little snake. And then I start at one end, and then I just kind of push it in and scoot it down. And this goes ahead and gets it kind of in there. And you break it off, and then you can start using your thumb to start breaking it apart and pulling it away. And then once you do that, then you can just turn it over and roll it out of the mold, and just kind of let gravity help you pull it out. And it's very simple. Now I'm probably gonna have to end up making probably 3 or 4 of these to go around the whole thing, but that's basically all you do. And then when it's time to pull it out, you just start doing it like this, and it comes out like that. And then I'm just gonna put the wood glue on the back and start wrapping it around like so.
I'm using the wood glue to put it down onto the stool, and then I'm using painter's tape to hold it in place. And I ended up using 2 full strips of the mold, and then I went in and made a partial casting, and I had to cut off just a little bit of that, so it was 2 and maybe a half castings, and I let that set overnight. Now that all of it is adhered to the stool and it's dry, I do want to paint it, so I'm going to go in with that moss color green, and I'm going to paint the mold in the green, and I'm going to use a small brush to paint on the outer side of it, and then I'm going to use an even smaller brush, which I don't do on camera just because I need it to be up closer to it, but I use a smaller brush to get on the top side and the bottom side of that mold with that green paint.
Alright, now I have the trim painted, so now I'm gonna put a sheet of paper from this book that I got from Hobby Lobby, $6.99, but I got it for 40% off. And the piece of paper that I'm using from it is this really pretty little floral print, the birds, and it's got the real pretty green in it. So I am gonna, now it doesn't cover it completely, so I'm just gonna mark it and cut. And then I'm gonna use the water method to kind of tear like I did on the tray. And then what I'll end up doing is sanding around the edges just to give it that more kind of worn look. But let me go ahead and get this cut. All right, I went ahead and cut because I'm gonna be sanding it anyways. There's no sense in tearing. So now what I'm gonna do, and it's not perfectly covering the top, but because I'm gonna be sanding around the edges, it's fine. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna Mod Podge the paper to the top of the stool. So I'm just gonna put the layer of Mod Podge on the top, put the paper down, and then cover the paper with the Mod Podge. Make sure that all of this is laying down good. So I'm going to put some parchment paper down, and I have my little mini heating iron, and I'm just going to go over it real good and get that Mod Podge reactivated, get all that paper laid down real good, and then I will start sanding around the edges.
To finish this off, I want to grunge it up just a little bit, and I'm using a little mini dauber and some antique wax to go around the outer edge of the top of the stool and around some of the legs of the stool, and then around the outer edge of the mold, and that just kind of gives it that kind of aged look. And this is what it looks like. I love the way this turned out. I think this is so pretty. I just love that paper. You'll have to let me know what you think in the comments.
Now these are the two things that I got from the estate sale earlier in the week, and I think I paid maybe 50 cents for each of them, maybe $1, and they're so pretty. So, but I do need to repair this one. So this is gonna need a little bit of wood glue. So I'm just gonna put some wood glue in here and just put it in there. And I do also need to clean them up. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and then I'm gonna show you what I'm gonna do to these. Okay, now I hope this isn't anticlimactic for you, but it was pretty exciting for me. Now, about a year ago, I got these two candlesticks at Salvation Army, and I never did anything to them. I never put them in my booth because I didn't know if I wanted to get rid of them. And would you look at how perfect these go together? I mean, they're perfect together. So when I saw these, I knew that I wanted to put this on top of this. Now, this is gonna stay with me. So I'm gonna try, because this is not completely flat, so I'm going to try wood glue first. There is a small rim here. If the wood glue doesn't hold, I'm just gonna put hot glue, and that'll keep it. But I'm gonna put wood glue on here and put this on top. And this is gonna make such pretty decor. I can't wait to get it put together. So let me go ahead and put the wood glue on.
Since the rim of the candlestick is not completely flat, I'm just trying to get as much on the places where I know it's gonna meet the bottom of that other piece as possible, so that it can have as much glue to connect the two. So anyway, once I get that on there,
I'm gonna try to make it as even as possible as well. And then I don't have any way of putting something on it to, you know, give it good pressure. So I just have to stand it up and hope for the best, but it does end up, it slides around for a little bit, but it does end up in the end actually gluing together and staying together. So it was all good. I just love these so much. I just think these are so pretty, and I can't believe that wood matches so perfectly. Yeah, these are definitely staying with me, but I definitely want to hear what you think of them, but I just think they're so pretty. But I definitely have to keep one of them on some kind of riser or books since they're the same height. This is a wood plank piece that I had in my stash, and then I also had these 3 little hooks that look like water faucets. I'm going to use this Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I'm dry brushing the paint on there. I didn't want full coverage because I wanted this to look like old kind of barn planks or whatever you want to call it. But I painted the surface of the planks or the wood, and then I'm going to decide how I want this to be configured, because I'm going to put those hooks on there and I'm going to make this into a patio sign. And since I have 3 of the hooks and I have 3 of those little planks that are longer, I wanted the planks to be on the bottom. This is a little stencil that I got. I think I got these from Hobby Lobby. It came in a set of, I don't know, maybe 8. So I'm going to use this one. I'm going to do the green leaves that are on each side in the color moss in the Waverly paint. And then the lettering I'm going to do in the Waverly chalk paint in the color ink. And I have it taped down with chalk paint, and I'm going to use the little dauber, the little sponge dauber. You can get these. I think I might have gotten these at Walmart, but you can get them at Dollar Tree, I think, too. And I'm just using light coats of the paint to kind of daub the paint onto the stencil. And I'm not doing heavy coats. I've learned that it's best to do light coats when you're doing stenciling. So once I get all of this done, I just take the stencil up. All right, now that the stencils are done, I'm gonna figure out where I want my hooks to be, and I mark where the screws are gonna have to be with a pen. And for some reason, I didn't get it on camera, but once I have where all the screws are going to be, I screwed the hooks into place with the screwdriver, and I don't have the power tool in, I'm not comfortable with power tools yet, so I did it with a manual screwdriver, but I set the hooks into place. And this project was done. This was a super easy project, but I think it turned out so cute. You'll have to let me know what you think. This actually sold pretty quickly when I put it in my booth. Little cabinet that I thrifted from Goodwill for about $4, but I'm going to use it like this. I'm going to remove these pegs, clean it up real good, take the little hangers off, and then fill in the little splits between the wood planks. And then I'm going to give it a good paint job and make this into a little piece of furniture or a little storage cabinet that you could use on a countertop, in your bathroom, in a kitchen, or, you know, in a bedroom. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I need to do is remove the hangers from the back. Then I'm going to take the pegs off by removing the screws from what was the top, or actually the bottom. Then I'm going to fill in with the wood glue, fill in the cracks with the wood glue, and let it dry overnight. Now I'm going to use this mold that I got from Temu, and I'm going to use air dry clay to make a little piece to put at the top, what will now be the top of the cabinet, just to kind of dress it up a little bit. So I'm using some wood glue to attach it to the top, and then I'm going to use this stamp to indent into the air dry clay. So I'm just using the stamp. I'm going to press it into the air dry clay just to make the indentation. Now for the new bottom of the cabinet, I'm going to use these little balls that I got from Hobby Lobby, and they have one flat side. So I'm just going to use wood glue and a little dollop of hot glue to put them onto the bottom, and that is going to make feet for the cabinet. Now I've taped everything off, and I'm going to use this chalk paint, and it is Waverly chalk paint in the color moss. And I'm going to give the cabinet a coat of chalk paint. And because the cabinet is already green, it really only takes one coat of the paint. Now, if there were any areas that I felt like needed a little bit more coverage, like around the places where I used the wood filler or the mold, then I just used a little bit more paint. Now I'm using a little bit of watered down Waverly chalk paint in the antique wax, just to kind of get that those little wood balls to kind of match the colors of the natural wood of the doors. I'm not using that much. Then I'm going to sand around the edges just to distress it a little bit, just to give it a little bit of age. Then I'm going to go over the whole piece with some clear wax, the Waverly clear wax, and I'm giving it a really good coat of that clear wax because this cabinet was really old, so it was very dry. Once I go over it with the clear wax, I don't wipe any back because it was very dry, and I do want to be able to control the amount of antique wax that I use. I do go around the edges and around that mold with a little bit of the antique wax, just to give it a little bit more of the age look. And I do make sure I go over that clear wood on the doors with that clear wax, and this project is finished. I think it's so pretty, and I love the way it looks as a cabinet. All right, now this project is one that I thrifted, and I was in a hurry to start grabbing stuff up because the doors had just opened, so I didn't film me getting this one, but I got this one on Wacky Wednesday from Salvation Army, so I only paid $3 for this one. And I'm gonna repaint this one, but this one's gonna be a little trickier because it's all nailed together, so I can't remove this. So I'm gonna have to figure out a way to paint as much as I can of the sides in here. Yeah, it's gonna be tricky, but I'm gonna do it the best I can, and I'm painting it white. So I may, let's see, no, I don't know. I started to say I may take this out. Let me see if it screws in. Yeah, so this screws in, so I may spray paint all this and try to get in there, and that way when I paint, it won't be as difficult. So that may be what I do first. Of course, I do have to clean it up, and I'm taking this off. I'll try to preserve this in case I want to use it on something else. But let me go ahead and try to take this off and get this cleaned up, and then I'm going to spray paint it. To spray this, I'm going to use this Rust-Oleum bonding primer. This is just some I had at the house. So I'm going to go ahead, especially on the inside, just because that's definitely going to be the harder spots to paint. So, all right, here we go. Once I got it sprayed, I did notice all the little holes, so I'm definitely going to fill that in with this wood filler. Once the wood filler dried, I sanded all that down, plus I sanded all the sides down because that spray paint on there made it have a very rough finish. So I wanted to get all of that smoothed. So I just sanded all of the pieces down, made sure it was all smooth. Once I got it all sanded down, then I wanted to make sure that none of this was going to show through. So I did spray it with a coat of Zinsser shellac just to make sure that nothing would shine through. But I'm going to have to get in this little crack right here. And so I'm going to use this little flat brush. And this came in a pack of brushes that I got for Christmas. So this is going to come in handy because there's a lot of different options for me to use to try to get in all the little cracks and crevices that are going to be difficult to reach in this project, especially like right down in here in this corner. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this painted, and I'm going to use the Dixie Belle drop cloth. I love this paint, and as you can see, I'm halfway through it. I've used it a lot since I bought it. So it's definitely one that I'm gonna buy again, but I am just gonna try to get this area painted first. Then getting that inside of the thing was, that was a little tricky too. But I just, you just do what you gotta do for these makeovers, but it all paid off because I think it turns out really pretty. But anyway, I did go ahead and finish painting all of this, and I gave it 2 coats of paint, and I let the paint dry overnight. I have the 2 coats on here, and this back here was a little tricky, but I got it done. So now I'm going to put on a transfer, or I'll probably put on several transfers, and I'm going to use this transfer set from IOD. And so yeah, I'm not exactly sure which ones. I'll probably use this one here on the front, and maybe this one here. I may put one on each side. So anyway, now I'm just gonna get these transfers put on. Now usually I put the transfers on not long after I paint and let the paint dry, but I will say by me letting the paint dry overnight, these did go on so much easier. But I did cut out this little crown and put that in the center instead of having those little words. And instead of putting the big flower on the top, I decided to go with this strip of flowers. I think it goes better with the pattern. But if you've never used transfers before, these are really easy to use. You just take off that backing, lay it on your project. You rub it down onto your project with the stick, and yeah, you just lift up that plastic until it's all transferred down, and then you rub it with the clear plastic to ensure that it is down, all the way. Now I'm going to go in and sand around the edges. The transfers kind of have a vintagey look, so I do want it to be a little bit distressed. But if you don't like the distressed look, you can always skip this step. But I do like it, so I think it looks really good. But once all of it is sanded and I've wiped back all of the sanding dust, then I go back over it with a coat of clear wax and wipe back the excess and let that dry. And then this project is done. And this is what it looks like. I think it turned out so pretty, and this will be great. I mean, you can use this for anything. You can use this in a kitchen for recipe cards or, cookie cutters or whatever. You can use it in a bathroom. There are so many uses. You could even kind of open the lid and put greenery in it. There's just so many different ways you can use it. For project 2, I have this cutting board that I thrifted for a couple of dollars, and then I have these little boxes or crates that you get from Dollar Tree. I had this one in my stash, and so I decided I was going to make a little kind of farmhousey sort of sign that you can use in your kitchen. So I'm going to paint it. I'm going to attach the crate to the cutting board, but I'm going to paint them separately just so that I don't have to try to get in between those little grooves. But I'm using Secret Garden by Country Chic. I love this color, and it is a really great paint. So I'm just going to paint the cutting board first, and then I'm going to do one coat of that and use my little heat gun to kind of get it to dry faster so that I can do the other side. Then I start painting the crate, and I did 2 coats of the paint inside the crate first just to get that over with because I hated painting inside. And then I go back and I do the outside of the crate, and once I finish one coat on the crate, then I go back and I do a second coat on both pieces. And you will be able to see how the one coat you can still kind of see through a little bit, so I knew that I needed to do another coat. And especially on the crate really showed the underneath finish, so definitely had to do 2 coats on this one. Now that I have the 2 coats done, I only did 1 coat on this side because I knew I was going to glue it onto the cutting board. So now I'm just going to use this Gorilla Glue wood glue to glue it to the surface of the cutting board. And since I knew I wouldn't be able to get in those grooves if there was a lot of glue seepage, I just kind of rubbed it on with my finger. But you'll notice that where I place the crate on the cutting board at first is different. It's in a different place than where I have it when I finish the project. But that's because after I set it down, I started thinking, I really need to make it flush with the bottom of the cutting board. That way it can sit on a countertop if whoever buys it wants to set it instead of hanging it.
So I removed the board or the crate real quick and wiped back the glue that was on it and just scooted it down. So here you can see it's flush with the bottom. But now I just found a hen cutout or hen image on my Cricut design space, and I'm using it as a stencil. So I took out the actual hen and I'm placing it down on the board where I want it, and I'm putting tape around the head because there wasn't a lot of room for error for stamping and painting in the stencil. But I just used the Waverly chalk paint and ink to get that hen painted in the stencil, and then I pull it back, and now I'm gonna sand around the edges. And I wasn't really gonna do anything else to it except a clear wax, but I wasn't taking into account that the crate was white and the cutting board was like a natural color. So I knew I was gonna have to go back with a dark paint. So I put, not a dark paint, but I used the antique wax to kind of go around the edges to make it all kind of one cohesive color. Then I went over everything with a clear coat of wax. I wrapped the handle in some twine, and I'm gonna use these beads that I got from Dollar Tree, and I'm gonna put 3 on each of the little strings that are left from, you know, wrapping the handle, and I'm gonna put them and just let them hang down, tie a knot underneath the beads, and then clip off the excess. And then all that will be left is just kind of decorating it the way because I'm actually going to put this in my vendor booth. So I wanted to go ahead and stage it of how you could use it, you know, in a kitchen. So once I get the beads done, then I'm going to use some sort of speckled neutral colored eggs that I got from, I think I got these from Hobby Lobby. Yes, I got these from Hobby Lobby after Easter, so I definitely got them for 90% off. And I'm just going to use a few of these eggs in the little crate, and then I'm going to, I don't show it on camera, but once I got the eggs in there, felt like it needed a little bit more, so I added a couple little sprigs of like a baby's breath. I don't actually know if it's technically a baby's breath or if it's just a white, I don't know, floral. But anyway, I think it turned out really cute. This is it with the little sprigs of whatever flower that is. Let me know in the comments what that would be. Obviously they're fake, but anyway, I just think this just turned out so super cute. And before I close out the video, I do want to share a Bible verse with you. And the Bible verse comes from Psalms 139, verses 13 and 14. And it says, "For you created my innermost parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you because I am awesomely and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well." I hope this blesses you today. And I do want to thank you so much for spending your time with me while I showed you these 15 farmhouse makeovers. Thanks so much. And if you're new to my channel, I would love it if you would be a part of my YouTube family. If you love this sort of content, then I would really appreciate it if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button and click the bell button so you're notified when I upload a new video. Let me know in the comments which project was your favorite, and please give this video a big thumbs up because it does help me out with YouTube. And if you want to see more videos like this, then go ahead and check out the boxes you see on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time. Bye.